Welcome back to the General Tire Jim Beaver Show with Good Times by Kawasaki. I'd like to welcome a good friend of mine, somebody I don't get to catch up with very often, Amanda Sorensen, to the show. What's happening, Amanda?
Hey Jim, how are you?
Good. Good to catch up. It's been a minute. You've been pretty damn busy. Let's just put it that way. Doing a little FD, some Extreme E, and everything else you fit in.
Yes, definitely a lot. Driving. Lots of sea time lately.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a good thing. So I want to go back to the beginning. I think the first time I met you, we were out at Del Mar doing some, I don't know, like a UTV demo in front of the crowd. Like it wasn't even really a race. There was only like a handful of people there. Like it's kind of a weird thing, but I think that was the first time I met you and your brother and your dad was out there.
Yep. Yeah, that was like a little demo thing that we did a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I do remember though the first. Okay, so like my first impression of Amanda Sorensen, didn't even know you, hadn't met your dad. Like I show up, here's this girl, and you were like little at the time. You're like 14, 15. You had a
Yeah, I was
UTV.
like 13 or 14.
Yeah. So so the audience knows Amanda's sitting here, and there was like a double. And most people were like scared to hit the double. Not Amanda. She wasn't just doubling it. You were jumping to flat. Like it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like you were hitting that jump and literally just landing 10, 15 yards past the landing just to flat. And I'm like, holy crap, who is that? They're like, oh, this is a little girl named Amanda. I'm like, I got to meet Amanda because you were flat. I don't even know, but you were, everybody gets to that feature and you were just jumping past everybody and you pick up like 2 or 3 positions every single lap because you were just jumping that much farther than everybody
I
else.
remember that, and then also there was like that little whoop section in the back that everyone was like, "How are you doubling it?" Like I would just like double it all the way across. It was a good passing point for sure. That was a fun event.
Yeah, it was a good time. It was like a fun little demo and I don't know, a good crowd there at Del Mar and uh,
Yeah.
yeah, awesome times. But ever since then, I mean, kind of take us through because you were really deep into the UTV stuff. I mean, doing the work stuff, things like that for a while. And then I talked to you. It's funny because I talked to your dad about, I don't know, it's like every once a year, he and I will hop on a call or something like that. It's on something random and we'll talk for quite a while. But you guys made this shift from off road stuff to Formula D. How did that happen? What was the thought process behind that? Because it was kind of like out of the blue. You guys like, yeah, we're going drifting now.
Yeah, so that was a little bit of a interesting turn of events. Honestly, I wasn't too stoked on that, not gonna lie. Just because I've always loved racing dirt and like that's just kind of where my heart is. So the drifting thing was a little bit of a change for me. We had started doing the drifting stuff in 2017 when Brandon and I were both racing the works, and we ran into an age issue with the classes that Brandon was in. So him and I were both leading points championship in both of our classes. We were doing double duty, and someone had brought up an age issue. And from there, it was like, okay, well, they ended up like disqualifying him for all the rounds that he had driven at, for like the 3 or 4 rounds previously. And so we were just like, all right, that's cool. There was obviously an age issue there, and we kind of were just like, I had a friend call me, and I was working for Vegas Off Road Racing Experience, going in just, I don't know, I would do like random things around the track all the time, and like I would help them set up the cones when they'd go do like the drift demos. And the guy that was my manager was like, "Hey, do you want to come drive my drift car?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" My brother was actually out of town that weekend, so I sent him a video driving the drift car, and he was like, "That's so cool, I want to do that." So, sure enough, as soon as he got home, we did some research. And getting into the drifting community, it's so hard to find cars for sale, parts to buy. I would say, like, everyone asks me all the time, like, how do I find this? Honestly, like, just go to the drift event, show up, talk to people. That's kind of how we did it. Um, but we found this drift car. It was just like a stock BMW E46, and we went and bought it. We picked it up, took it out to Vegas Drift, which is like a local drift event. Brandon and I started to like play around in the wet session a little bit, and we shared this car for a good year and a half. So at the time, though, I just was like so devastated. I also was competitively figure skating at the time, so like I had a few things that I was focused on other than driving. I was going to school full time. I had just graduated college. I just graduated high school, and so I was going to college, figure skating, and then I'd go burn like one set of tires while Brandon would burn like
This is
eight.
all new to me, the figure skating thing. Like, I thought I knew you pretty well. I didn't know you were a competitive figure skater.
Yeah, I also played volleyball. I played harp, cello, piano. I did
I,
all
I knew
sports.
about the volleyball. I didn't know harp, cello. I didn't know about that. But it's figure skating. Like, I
Yeah.
want you got to be ripped to be a figure skater. Like, I mean, so that's I obviously had to help your racing because you're in great shape to be a figure skater.
I would say there's a lot of things that actually cross over from figure skating to drifting that have benefited me, just because the mentality thing of a judge-based sport. So,
Yeah, okay.
going into, drifting, like, it's crazy because I always had this problem with skating. I would go and, like, do a routine over and over again. I'd land every jump, every spin, but then as soon as it came to competition, like, I would get stage fright or something would happen, and, like, there's just that one that I couldn't land, or there's one that I would mess up. So it's crazy because over these years of skating, like I've just had to learn how to cope with this, like going out and performing when it matters. And my first year into drifting, it just like clicked one day, and it was like it's no different than a practice event. Like, what's the difference? And it's all a mentality thing. So like that was huge going into drifting for me.
It's funny. There's certain things that have been that way in my life. Um, like with motorsport and learning things, and it's like you struggle, and it's like you have this one day where it just like clicks and you figure it out, and it's like you go from being like just so down and like struggle busting on yourself to it's like, holy crap, this is why I do this. Like, it all works. And I just bring that up because I've had that throughout my career, but I just had it happen like a month ago. I got back to riding stand-up jet skis courtesy of Kawasaki. But it was like I was struggling. I'm like, I can't do this like I did 20 years ago. And it was like all of a sudden one day I got a tip from a buddy, Mark Gomez, and I went out and tried it. And everything put it together. And I was like, holy crap, this is why jet skiing's so much fun. I'm not falling all the time. Like, I can hook up and go around corners. So it was one of those where I get what you're talking about, where just you have that day where it clicks and then it becomes fun
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, this is why I put in the work.
Yeah, exactly.
So take us through that, because I know, like, FD and that, I mean, you guys, obviously, I know your brother and you have, moved up the ranks, stuff like that. I mean, it's drifting. There's a lot of grassroots drifting, and there's a big difference between the competition level at grassroots drifting to Pro 2 and say FD. I mean, that's a big step.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say for us, it's been a huge learning curve. As you can tell over the past few years, we've kind of quickly moved up the ranks. But with that came a lot of like sleepless nights, hard work. There's so many things that we learned, and it was crazy. And like, honestly, I'm thankful for all of the experiences we've gone through, from running the semi into a bridge in New York City in the middle of the night, like just like random things that you'd never think of that we experience, going up the ranks, right? Because like going from the West Coast grassroots drifting, driving to California, they don't have bridges in California, it's nice straight freeway all the way there. But Brandon and I, like, over the years have developed a team that's like super rad. We're still working to put together the best fit for us, which is a hard thing. There's a lot of things about drifting that are like so unique too, that also I feel like have really just, it's been a learning curve. There's a lot of challenges and roadblocks because some things are a lot different in drifting than off-roading. Even like the car prep, understanding the consumables in the car, how often we have to replace axles, how, just there's so much that goes into it. And like drifting is the most weird concept because you want to lose traction while maintaining the most amount of grip. It's like contradicting itself, right? So we're bringing in these engineers to develop and just try to understand more of like, how do we use the most grip possible? How do we generate the most grip while also not burning through the tires fast? And, just like, you also learn about tire graphs, and once they get to a certain temperature, they start to lose grip. So there's just like a lot that goes into it, and there's so much science behind it, which honestly is kind of the part that I've started to really take a liking in. Same with Brandon. Brandon has designed and engineered parts for our team and our cars, so he's kind of been on this like whole developmental engineering side of things where He scans the whole car with his ferro arm and puts it into CAD, and then he develops. He developed our angle kits because the BMWs have the most kind of what we've done as far as like over time, we've kind of experimented with this. We're finding that the BMWs have the most grip under load. So, that being said, we're trying to design these angle kits and these arms that allow us to keep the grip as we get on the throttle, as we surge to the next car in front of us. So, there's a lot that's kind of like gone into it that Brandon and I have just like, there's just so much more than driving in Formula Drift that's really like kind of drawn our attention. And not only that, for me too, on the marketing side of things, we just recently picked up a title sponsor about 2 years ago, the United States Air Force, which is like super awesome to be working with them and like working one on one with them and going out and doing a lot of like marketing stuff to just bring brand awareness to our military. That's super fun. But the marketing side of things, the platform that Formula Drift allows us to market on is just insane. Like we have anywhere from, we're our first round is Streets of Long Beach. The same weekend, well, the weekend prior to Acura Grand Prix. So we're bringing in around 80,000 people that I can market in front of. That for me was something that I just like really drew interest into as far as doing an activation at our booth or doing some content collabs. Like there's just so much to it that I've really grasped on, as well as Brandon, from like all different aspects. It's kind of really helped elevate our program.
Well, and that's what's funny. Like, you talk about off road and people go, oh, there's these big events, Mint 400, King of the Hammers. And I'm like, those live streams have huge numbers. I'm like, but FD has those numbers like every single round. And it's like you look at the top social followings in off road, BJ Baldwin, and obviously you when you go off roading now. But and we'll get into your social and stuff in a minute. But it's like you look at FD and you've got Vaughn, you've got Turk, you've got Forsberg. I mean, I can go down the list and there's so many people with big followings, and it's like the audience for Formula Drift it's insane, and people don't realize that. They want to compare off road to FD, and I'm like, FD really, like, globally is such a bigger motorsport than off road. I understand why you guys are there.
Well, and I think it's crazy too because my audience is international because of drifting. I'm bringing in fans from Brazil, Dominican Republic, Europe, because it's so large overseas that that's like their NASCAR in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, it's well, and even in like Japan, I mean, FD is, and drifting in general. I mean, it's just massive over there in Japan.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your social media, because I think a lot of people don't realize behind the scenes, like how in depth you are. It's not, your social following isn't just, oh, Amanda throws up a post and hopes people like it. Like you've hired companies to really help you like look at the numbers and develop like your following and track things. I mean, you're very smart in regards to the marketing on the social side. Like there's a lot of reasoning behind everything you do, and I don't think people realize how much effort and time you've spent, what I mean, understanding the analytics and that side of social media.
Well, actually, I'm proud to say that I haven't hired anybody to help me with my socials.
Right. Well, no,
I've
no, I
been
mean tracking
like,
that. But you're doing it yourself, but I mean the tracking and the analytical side, right?
okay, yeah, I see. I actually just got on board with Hook It like 2 months ago, so now I'm starting to understand that and understand ad value. Um, honestly, it's crazy because even right now I could probably open up my Instagram and reload it, and it would jump up 1,000 followers. I've kind of found that formula for trending videos, and Reels are just so huge right now, and that's like what's grown my audience tremendously. Uh, because you're reaching a new audience, right? Right now, my engagement ratios are just like outrageous because of the audience that I am reaching is not necessarily the audience that's already following me, which creates a higher engagement ratio. TikTok too is like huge for me. Almost at 1 million on TikTok, so that's I kind of have honestly like taken a break from it because there's so much that goes into it, recording wise and editing, and I do all the editing myself. I have a filmer that just films, but I'm so picky on my content that I just edit it all myself. So I don't really post a lot. I'm more of like a quality over quantity type
Yeah.
of person. But I definitely would say like this year I want to try to dive deeper into YouTube. A lot of people just kind of know the like super they don't really know like the deep stuff. They only know kind of what they see. Oh, this girl can drive. But like, how did I get to this point? There's a lot that went into it. Like I was saying, even just like having a whole team that works for me, that's like that's a lot to take on. Being a 19-year-old and having, between Brandon and I, like we had a good 25 guys working for us. And with that, like there was like this huge switch up in our career, our driving career, where our parents were basically like, "Hey, you want to drive? Go find the money." So I kind of had this huge like turning point where I'm like, "Okay, well, how much does this even cost?" So the sponsorship thing really played a huge role in that, and it was crazy because like going back to 2021, the beginning of the year, the cars were sitting with car covers in the garage like in January, and the season started in April, and I was like, Brandon, let's drive. Like, there's so much potential in Formula Drift. There's such a good career path that there's here for us. Like, we need to pursue it, and like we need to figure out how to do it. And so that's kind of when I just like started diving into books. I read Alex Stryler's marketing book, and it's kind of like it has really good things in it, but it's also kind of old school. So you gotta like you gotta put your little twist on it. But like going into that year, it was crazy because in March, I would say, within like 3 months of doing research, building a deck, putting a lot of things together, understanding like what would draw companies' attention. Um, Within those 3 months, like the Air Force called me and they're like, "Hey, what's an associate sponsor look like?" And I'm like, "How about title sponsor? You want us to drive this year? Like, let's put a program together." So I sold them on a full sponsorship, and like from there on, like, yeah, there's days where it's like, okay, I'd say our first year we definitely didn't break even at all. So it was a learning process. But being that we are 18 and 19-year-old kids learning how to do business, we did pretty good for our first year. Going into our second year, we learned a lot more. But not only was it like managing the money side of things, but also now managing the guys that work for us, putting in a crew chief. Um, just like there was so much that went into it. Having to find, a tire shop in the middle of Virginia at 2 a.m. because the truck just blew a tire, like just random stuff. So you learn how to be prepared. Because our first year, it was like obviously such a huge jump. But with every mistake, there was a lesson learned. So the next year, we've improved. And that's kind of like our motto. We've just been learning our lessons and trying to be more prepared every single time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's honestly, it's kind of awesome because I kind of had the same, thing. My dad kind of got me started in racing, but at some point, hey, I'm not going to fund this. And so
Yeah.
hence me doing radio and everything else that I do. But it's like, it's kind of, in a way, it makes you value everything more though. It's like every time you've got the car on the track or you get that check come in from a sponsor, it's like, hey, I did this, I earned this, and I think there's something that goes along with that. You know what I mean? It's like there's a little bit of pride in what you do and everything means a little bit more.
Yeah, I'd say, definitely our whole lives, they've just dangled the carrot in front of our face and they don't really give it to us. But with that, there's like, if you don't get straight A's, or I was an advanced honors diploma student, so I was like always pushed to the top. And it's like, if you don't graduate with the advanced honors diploma, like you're not really going racing. So there's a lot that kind of went into it that nobody really seen behind the scenes. But there's a lot that racing has taught me as far as like growing up, how to, be in business, and from marketing side to engineering side to all of it, communications, relationships, marketing. There's so much that has gone into like growing up in the motorsports industry that's kind of like developed me into who I am. And I'm excited to see like in the next 5 years, even where we're going to be at. So.
Yeah. Well, and all that being said, like let's talk a little bit about, how this extreme thing came to be, and I want to talk about that a little bit because, you guys got into FD, but it wasn't like you completely abandoned off-road. I mean, we've seen you in a 6100 truck. We've seen you do a little bit of UTV stuff here and there, since then. I mean, how did I mean, Chip Ganassi Racing, it's I mean, one of the most iconic American teams in any kind of motorsport. How did that happen, and how did kind of the door get open for you to slot into that spot?
Well, I showed up to a Nitro Rallycross race just as a spectator, and I think Nitro Rallycross is like up and coming, going to be one of the coolest sports ever. I am trying to work on putting a program together for it because the Group E class is like so rowdy, so sick. I am obsessed with what Travis is doing. So I was like, oh, I'm going to go attend a Nitro Rallycross event, and which it's actually called Nitro Cross now, so Nitro Cross. But I showed up, and I was just a spectator, and I seen that Scotty Lawrence had his little setup out there, and I was like, hey, you got an extra car? Like, I have my gear just in case, And so I only drove one day. Me and Jim York actually split the car because the cost, and we're like, showed up, found a sponsor right on the spot, and between Jim and I, we both kind of covered it. And on Friday, I got a little bit of practice. Going into Saturday, I had actually podiumed. So that was my first time racing off-road in like forever. I think since 2017, maybe, despite the 30 miles that I made it in Mint 400. So it was like I was so stoked to be back in the off-road and short course. And I had posted this video, third place, whatever, back in off-road racing. And they'd actually sent me an email, and like it was a week before they had their test coming up. So they had like a female test that they were doing. And it caught me off guard. I'm like, who's Chip Ganassi? Obviously, growing up in off-road, we don't follow IndyCar. So I didn't really like know who they were. I kind of had an idea, whatever. And he's like, hey, can you be available? It was like a Thursday. And he's like, can you be available Monday through Wednesday next week? And I was like, who is this guy? Like we had a phone call. And I was like, sure, opportunity kind of presents itself. I always tend to take them. And so they're like, hey, we seen this video that you had podiumed at Nitro Rallycross, and they just weren't too sure by scrolling through my Instagram, like what exactly I've driven before, any of my off-road experience, because I mean, I only really post about drift because that's been like the last 4 or 5 years of my life. And so I show up to this test. It's me and 3 other girls, and it was 3 days of like hardcore driving, and it was the most random, crazy test day I've ever been to. And it was crazy because I was kind of thinking about going down the NASCAR route. So I'd done a little bit of circle track racing, and I'd just done a test day with Toyota. And like, honestly, I wasn't like too stoked on NASCAR, but I had realized the potential in NASCAR, and I kind of wanted to switch up a little bit, add more on my plate. And so like the NASCAR Toyota test day, that was super chill. So I'm like, all right, I'm ready for another test day. Cool. I show up to the dry lake bed, and there's like 50 flags, green and red, put into the ground. And they're like, all right, we're going to be driving RJ Anderson's Pro 2, and I've never driven a Pro 2 before. And they're like, we want you to basically find your way through these flags and like, put down fast lap time. And I'm like, there's 50 flags on the dry lake bed. There's no like visual reference points. How am I supposed to navigate through this? So we do one track walk and we walk through it. And this course is probably like a mile and a half long. And so we go do a test, and like that's our first test. And then we run the course backwards, and then we get our own data, but we can't see any of the other females' data. And I'm like, well, give me RJ's data at least. Like, I want to see where I compare, And so then from there, I was like hunting down RJ's times the whole weekend or the whole week, Monday through Wednesday. They'd actually sent girls home on Tuesday. So it's like there's so much pressure, and they were just like, so like, listen, like this is serious. This is like extreme E that we're talking about. You're racing against drivers like Tanner Faust, Sebastian Loeb, Carlos Sainz, and it's like, okay, like, well, where do we stand against them? So it was just like such a serious test, and it was crazy because there's so much pressure, but like I performed so good under pressure because of my background with, like I said, the figure skating thing and then the Formula Drift thing. And they're explaining to me too, like Extreme is so short. We show up to these rounds and we have no practice time. We literally show up and it's like 2 laps of practice, straight into racing the next day. So you don't really have time to go out and memorize those, spots on the course. We do one track walk before. It's 2 hours long, so we walk the whole track, take pictures. But obviously, when you're walking towards a jump versus like approaching it at race speed, it's completely different. So there's things that you notice, things that you don't notice in the track walks. So like basically, they're trying to mimic something like an extreme event out on the dry lake bed with a Pro 2 truck. And overall, it was just like such a good experience, honestly, because it was like very equivalent to kind of what extreme is. And then right when we had left the test on Wednesday, they had given me a call like 20 minutes later and said like, "Hey, thanks for making our choice easy. We would like to proceed with this. Can we sign you for 2 years?" And I'm like, "Who are you?" Like, okay, 2 years, a lot can happen in a
Yeah.
year, especially like looking at my last 6 months. And so I ran into an issue with an overlapping events with Extreme and Formula Drift. So it was a huge choice that I had to make. And honestly, like I'm stoked with the choice that I made with signing the contract with Extreme and Chip Ganassi and GMC fully backing us and us kind of representing them on a global standpoint. But not only that, like we're part of the technology development and e-racing. So it's pretty cool to like race the electric cars. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, these batteries. So
Yeah.
not only that, we're all-wheel drive, so we're kind of dealing with front-to-rear power distributions. And there's so much technology to play with in these cars. It's so like I just like it's very satisfying to see kind of like all the development that we're working with them.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you get to go to some amazing places, right? This year alone, you've been to what? Saudi, Scotland, you've got what? Italy, Chile. I think there's it's up in the air whether it's going to be US or Amazon. Like, this is a pretty awesome global series. Like,
Yeah,
you get to go
totally.
to some amazing places.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, why not? I'm 20, might as well travel the world and go race cars.
Yeah.
I think it's a good choice.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's a dream job for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, right. So,
Well, so I mean, so you and RJ actually put it on the podium there in Scotland. How did that feel? That had to have been pretty awesome. I mean, you guys had kind of been chipping around in the finals, like you were right around the podium all year so far. I know we're just 2 rounds deep, or I guess 4 rounds deep at this point, but 2 different venues. But how was that to put it on the podium? That had to feel good.
honestly, I'm stoked. Like, with the whole Extreme thing, my first qualifying ever, like, I qualified first. So, my Extreme debut in Saudi Arabia, like, I go out and RJ and I qualify first. So, for it being my first race and RJ's second race, and everybody else has 2 or 3 full seasons on us, that was pretty awesome. I think between RJ and I, we have such a good teamwork and like we get along so well. He's like my older brother, so it's like such a good relationship between him and I. There's parts where like is succeeding, and then there's parts where like I succeed. So together we just kind of work through our problems, and I can help him in some parts, he can help me in some parts. So it really works out super well. And I think that strategy with like him and I just working together, the team, everyone's communication so on point that like we're making such good progress and we're able to step into the series, and with them having all their past experiences and RJ and I being able to learn from their past mistakes and seeing that kind of stuff, like we've made such good progress just walking into the series, showing up for our first race. I mean, the grid play thing, let's talk about it. Like,
Yeah.
we need the votes so bad. I it's kind of, it kind of it really determines like the final results in these races when everything matters in the first turn. So if I don't have the best gate choice and I know that I'm not getting whole shot from spot 5, like I just kind of really have to work with what I'm given. And so like everybody vote on grid play. You can vote 2 times a day. Vote for me, vote for RJ, vote when it opens till it closes. So it's like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Even if the time zones are different, vote from every single account, Twitter, Facebook, So like everybody else overseas kind of got it figured out because it always plays out in their time zones. Whereas like for the Americans, it opens when everyone's going to bed and then closes when everyone wakes up. So this grid play thing though, it matters for our finals. So RJ and I, our luck has been qualifying first, qualifying third, and then we get to the final and we have the last gate pick. And so it's like Supercross race, you know, like you want to get that first gate pick so you can get whole shot. Because it really matters when you have clean air in these cars. Like it is a 9-day difference, especially because not gonna lie, the windshield wipers don't work the best. And as you could see in Saudi Arabia, it was literally a mud fest. Like my
Yeah.
windshield wipers stopped working because there's so much mud on my windshield. So I just had to like drive cautiously enough to get the car in because there's so many penalties that come with hitting a flag or missing a gate. So like you really want to make sure you're staying on course. But yeah, so I'd say like overall we've been doing pretty good. But if this, if we could get some help on this grid play, maybe we'd have better results in the finals.
I'm thinking grid play is going to come into your favor though, because you've had the European or the overseas rounds, and then you're going to end up having Chile. You're also going to have either Amazon or a North American round. So I'm like, those are all going to be kind of time zones over here. So I'm like, I don't know. I think it's going to come back into your favor here later on, because I'm assuming with the events being closer to the home time zone, it might help American votes.
I'm hoping because we pray for grid play every time. We're like, okay, where are we at? And we check it like every minute. We're like, okay, are we still last? Like, yes, we're last. We need your guys' votes.
That's what we need, a video you and RJ on your hands and he's just begging people, please vote.
No, it's crazy. Yeah, definitely. So, but third place felt good.
Yeah. How does racing that vehicle compare? Because you've spent time in a 6100 truck. How does that, like, because I think a lot of people in the Southwest, they desert race, this and that, and how does that vehicle compare to what, we know as a 6100 or like a trophy truck here in the Southwest?
Honestly, when I would say the car is nothing like I've ever driven. For one, you really got to get used to having no motor sound. It sounds like the car's braking. You hear the mud flaps hitting against the fender. You hear all the rocks hitting the car. But the way it handles is it's honestly big. Like my first time getting to Saudi and seeing it in real life, I'm like, wow, this is a lot bigger than I thought. Like it's bigger. It's like 2 4C razors put in one, honestly. So it's way bigger than it looks, and I'm sure everyone's probably only seen it from videos or, live streams and broadcasts, but like these things are pretty big and they're like, quite hefty. So the steering on them is kind of slow responsive. So you see a lot of crashes, and I think that's just because of the amount of rotations that it takes to turn the wheel is kind of more excessive than any other, short course car or desert racing car, even just like the razors themselves. We talk about like for testing if we would go take a razor and then basically take the steering quickener out and reverse it because the steering inputs are so different. Not only that, just having the front to rear power distributions, that can change the way the car handles from one race to another. So you can totally make it handle like a Pro 2 if you put it in all-wheel drive or in all just rear drive. And then like you can kind of have it handle more like a Pro 4 if you have the front and rear 50-50. But now at this point, like we're kind of doing a lot of playing around with front to rear power distributions as we add steering input, take away steering input. So it just really doesn't compare to anything like I've ever driven before. The one thing that I would say that it compares to is the Tatum sand truck because the front end is so light when you get on the throttle, like how the Tatum sand truck is. And it's just very it's very dainty, like in a way. When you're going and you're up and, up at speed and like everything's good, it's great. But then as soon as one little thing upsets the car, like it's so hard to recover from. And that's why you see these crazy gnarly crashes. I had this like one like scare in Scotland where I got up on 2 wheels and like I saved it. And I'm like, I don't know how I saved that. If you watch the in-car video, like my reaction times with my hands, like it's literally hand over hand, like as in if I'm like I could relate it to, have you ever seen anyone like do transition in a drift car where they kind of do hand over hand on
Yeah.
the drift car instead of like catch and release? Like that's kind of what it looked like. It's just crazy because there's so many the steering's completely different and you don't really sit it into the turn and drive around it, nor do you like drive the bank. There's just so much that goes into it. It also has turning brakes, so like those are fun to play around with. Well, an e-brake, but nothing, it doesn't compare to anything like I've ever driven. So
Yeah, I know there was a video of you like somebody crashed in front of you at one of the races. I think it was one where was it
oh yeah,
Saturday?
that was
Like
a
car
McLaren.
in front of you and you just barely dodged it.
Yeah. McLaren crashed. That was crazy just because Scotland was so slippery and so muddy. Like, it was insane.
So my takeaway from the last 10 minutes, you're the first person on the planet to call an extreme e-car dainty.
Yeah, I would say it's a little bit like the steering is just so dainty. You
I
know what
know.
I'm saying?
I'm just giving you crap because I can at this point. um, so what's next for you? Obviously, I think what have you got? Sardinia here. Do you have any FD rounds? Because you're still trying to cycle in a few FD rounds too, right?
Yeah, so New Jersey is coming up in like 2 weeks, or next week we actually for New Jersey, and then after that is Italy, and I fly straight from Italy to St. Louis. So 2 FD rounds, one Extreme E round, and just always going.
Is it
I
hard to
don't even
switch
know what's
gears?
after that. I really just take it day by day, honestly.
Yeah, that's I think probably the best thing to do. Is there any how hard is it to switch back and forth between extreme E mode and FD?
I would say, well, I just got in the FD car about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks in Jersey, did a little bit of testing, and it's been a while since I've drifted, so it was a little bit different. But like I said, like the Extreme E car having the e-brake in it, like, that kind of relates over. But I've been doing it my whole life, switching back and forth and driving like go-karts or, racing in short course and bouncing back and forth playing double duty a lot. So it's nothing that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, they've all kind of got their own specific skill set, so it's pretty
Yeah,
easy to flip the
definitely.
switch and just yeah. So, well, awesome, man. It's been great catching up, Amanda. It's been a while, but stoked on everything that's going on with you with Extreme E, and I know the effort you've put in behind the scenes, and man, it's awesome to see it all kind of finally coming together for you.
Yes, definitely.
All right, we will be back after this on the General Tire Jim Beaver Show with Good Times by Kawasaki.